Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Yuuei Survival Guide. This will be Part 5, Chapter 3. Izuku stirs awake the following morning to the loud, insistent blaring of his phone alarm. He reaches blindly for the device beside him, rubbing hard at tired eyes as he fumbles the electronic between his fingers. He just faintly remembers haphazardly setting the alarm on his phone the evening prior, before he'd promptly passed out. He turns the alarm off with a swipe of his finger, then focuses blurry eyes on the time, blinking owlishly as he processes what he's seeing. It's early. Way earlier than he usually wakes up. He's not sure whether it's because he was so tired when he set the alarm that he accidentally pressed the wrong numbers, or if nighttime Izuku had a plan that morning Izuku doesn't recall. For a second, he's confused. Why is he in the living room? Had he been so tired when he got home that he just passed out on the first plush surface he'd come into contact with? Why hadn't he forced himself to take a couple more steps so he could have sprawled out on his bed instead? He'd slept fine, though he still feels exhausted, but he probably would have slept better in an actual bed. He doesn't tend to sleep in the living room, especially when there's a chance his mother could come home at any point. She used to always get upset whenever she found him asleep in the living room instead of his own room. Honestly, Izuku, why did I even buy you a bed if you never use it? And that was about the last time he'd stopped having impromptu sleepovers in front of the television in the living room. The next thing Izuku hazily notices is that he's hugging the television remote to his chest as if it's a plush toy. His cheek had been pressed into the top half of the buttons as he'd slept, so he's sure he has button indentations. Izuku slowly brings his hand up to thumb at his cheek, the pad of his thumb dipping in and out of little indents pressed into his face, just like he'd feared. How embarrassing. Hopefully they're gone before he gets to school because he's not sure how he'd explain cuddling with a television remote. Izuku leans forward to set the remote on the coffee table, only to pause when he notices the next odd thing. The TV is still on, volume so quiet that he can barely hear it. Is he watching the Hero documentary channel? It's been a while since he watched this channel despite his adoration for heroes and interest in analysis. A lot of the documentaries are old and outdated now, and it's way easier getting information online. It's still his favorite TV channel, even if he doesn't actually watch TV all that often anymore. Izuku's head angles toward the flashing lights in confusion, a frown settling on his lips. He hadn't meant to leave it on all night. What a waste of power. His mother would have been livid if she'd seen this, but thankfully, she must be working another late shift. Izuku turns the television off before setting the remote on the table, distantly wondering when his mother would grace him with her presence again. The boy settles back into the backrest of the couch, reaching up to rub the sleep from his eyes. Except when he moves, there's a sharp pain in his arm. Izuku's attention drops to the sting, staring wide-eyed at the state of himself before everything comes back to him, all at once. Right. The battle trials All Might had them doing during class. Kachan's powerful attacks burning into his arm and up to his hand when he'd lifted the limb to shield his face. Using One for All on the building, completely shattering his arm in the process. Izuku thinks he remembers those last fleeting moments before he'd finally passed out from pain and overexertion, just after they'd managed to complete their simulation trial. They'd won in the end, hadn't they? Him and Uraraka. That sounds about right. Izuku tries to think back to what happened after that, but he doesn't really remember much. The next thing he really recalls is Shirakumo, Oboro, because they were officially friends now, falling into step with him as he'd stumbled his way home, running on nothing but fumes by that point. And then, oh right, he'd invited the ghost in so he could watch some television, and it's hazy after that. But it does explain why he's on the couch and why the TV was on all night. Makes sense. Oboro? Izuku calls out languidly, a confused frown settling on his lips as he picks up the edge of a blanket pulled in his lap. It's the throw blanket that usually sits unused on the back of the couch, one of his mother's favorites. Izuku doesn't remember pulling it down over himself, and why hadn't he unfolded it if he was going to use it? Ah, well, it doesn't really matter. He wasn't cold, so that's all he can really ask for. Izuku gets no response from the ghost as he shoves the blanket off his lap and pushes himself into a straighter position. Ah, that's right. The ghost was gone. Oboro wasn't staying the night with him. He was just here to kill time, wasn't he? He'd been waiting until Aizawa-sensei's night patrol. Still, Izuku hopes the ghost at least had a good time in the apartment, even if Izuku had conked out just minutes after turning the TV on for him. Hopefully Oboro wasn't too bored with Izuku being a less-than-decent host. Izuku wishes the ghost had woken him to say bye before leaving, but then again, if the television being on all night hadn't woken or disturbed him throughout the night, then he's sure nothing short of a good shake to his shoulders would have done the job, and that's... well, it's not quite in Oboro's wheelhouse anymore. Izuku takes a second to collect his thoughts, his burnt hand coming up to dry wash his face in hopes of waking him from the lingering clutches of sleep. He still feels drowsy, wonders if he'd gotten enough rest to satisfy Recovery Girl when he sees her later this morning. The cotton of the bandages on his arm irritates his eyelids, but it wakes him more than it bothers him. He honestly can't wait for the bandages, cast, and sling to come off. He misses having full use of his arms. Izuku's arm drops back into his lap, a sigh leaving his lungs as he glances down at the state he's in. He'd really just passed out, hadn't he? He's still in his school uniform, the fabric beyond wrinkled from not only sleeping in it, but sleeping in it on the couch. Izuku can tell his hair's a bit mussed by how it falls into his face, and he can feel that it's a little greasy from the sweat of the battle trial. Izuku has half a mind to try showering before school, but it's probably not the best idea with his arms still bandaged and casted. And lifting his arms any higher than his chest actually hurts, so he decides to forego the shower today. Besides, he's got other things to be worried about, like trying to be on time for classes after having to squeeze in a visit to Recovery Girl's office. Izuku heads into his room to change into his second school uniform because showing up in his uniform again when it looks like this is a very bad idea. He doesn't want to give his teacher any other reason to expel him, and Izuku wants to look nice too. A uniform he slept in isn't up to his own standards, or the school's, probably. It's as Izuku's tugging his school jacket on, gritting his teeth in pain as the fabric drags across his arms, that he realizes what nighttime Izuku had planned when setting his alarm for so early. He should just head to school earlier so that he doesn't have to miss any classes while he is with Recovery Girl. That's logical, right? Then Sensei won't have anything to be mad about unless, of course, Recovery Girl deems him unfit to attend classes, which he really has no say in. Aizawa-sensei couldn't be mad at him over that, could he? Izuku forces himself to brush away the thought as he hurries to find his school bag. He finds it on the couch, then leaves the apartment after locking the door behind himself. The boy just barely manages to make it on time for the earlier train than his usual one, the door shutting the second after he steps in. Izuku heaves out a sigh of relief as he collapses back into one of the seats. The train is quieter this early in the morning. The only other people on the train are a few men dressed in business suits, no doubt on their way to their 9-to-5 jobs. Spread sparsely throughout the train car, and a tiny old lady towards the far end of the car, who is just gazing out the window as the world passes them by. It's peaceful. The old lady glances over at Izuku halfway through the ride, and he offers her a kind smile. Izuku's stop comes first, so with a respectful bow of his head in the old woman's direction, Izuku stands. It's only then, as he heads to the door with a glance at the others in the train car, that he finally notices how uncomfortable and confused the businessmen look as they watch him, which is when Izuku realizes the lady on the train must be a ghost. He bowed to a ghost. He really must be out of it. Izuku had hurried off the train after that, jogging away from that situation quickly after realization dawned on him. The school is quiet when Izuku steps into the building, but to be fair, it was only just after 6:30 in the morning, and classes didn't start until 8. The doors are unlocked, and Izuku spots a couple other students who've arrived early too, but it doesn't look like there's many teachers here yet. He passes maybe 2 students in the cafeteria, and a third sitting in the hallway engrossed in a book. Izuku makes his way to Recovery Girl's office, heart dropping into his stomach when he finally arrives. And the door is locked. There's not even a light on in the room. The youthful heroine clearly isn't even at the school yet, and Izuku doesn't even know when she'd be arriving, which sucks. Clearly his plan wasn't as thought out as he thought it was. Izuku lingers outside the door for a second, debating his next move. He could sit outside the infirmary and wait for her, but he's really not sure if he'd be able to push himself up when she did get here, without making a fool of himself. And his arms are already aching just standing there, so he doesn't want to do anything that would put him in more pain than he's already in, or strain or injure his arms further. He wants to get back to class as soon as he can. Also, he's pretty sure that whatever the old woman had given him yesterday for the pain had worn off at some point in the night. He's really starting to feel the broken arm and forearm-long burn, which leaves him the option of heading to his homeroom classroom to wait for a more reasonable time to show up outside of the infirmary. It makes the most sense. He'll be able to sit in an actual chair in the classroom, which sounds far more appealing than sinking to the floor here. So that's where he heads. 1A's classroom door is unlocked but not open. Izuku slides the door open, struggling a little with his injuries, before peeking into the dark room prior to flicking the lights on. The room is neat and tidy, meaning his classmates really had cleaned up before heading home themselves. Izuku feels a little bad he hadn't helped. Izuku slips into the room, barely making it to his chair, when a voice startles him. "Midoriya." The teen whips around to face the door as if he'd been caught doing something wrong, cheeks flushing as he smiles sheepishly at Aizawa-sensei. The man stood peering into the room from the hallway looks tired, but that's no different than any other time he's seen the man. What is different, though, is the hint of surprise in the teacher's eyes. The man's attention drops down to lazily scan over Izuku's frame, instantly singling in on his arms, wrapped in bandages and a cast respectively. The sling is probably an attention-drawing eyesore, keeping his broken arm nestled safely to his chest. The man's mouth presses in a straight line before his eyes flick back up to Izuku's face. And as odd as that, in and of itself, is, the stranger part of this situation is the fact that present Mike's head peeks into the room from the doorway, managing to peer in from the tiny gap between Aizawa-sensei and the doorframe. They're arriving at the exact same time, like the two of them had walked into the school together, and that the one word from Aizawa-sensei, the surprised mutter of Izuku's surname, had the other pro backtracking to investigate. "Ah, good morning, little listener." Present Mike grins widely, with far more enthusiasm than his counterpart, still taking up space in the doorway. The voice hero leans into the room a little further, before freezing abruptly when he, too, spots the injuries. "Sheesh, kiddo. Looks like you've been through the ringer." Izuku can't help the snort of laughter he lets out. How could he not, when his teacher had just blurted something like that out? Izuku knows he probably looks the part, but it's funny that present Mike would point it out in such an unprofessional way. Clearly, Aizawa-sensei must share the same sentiment as he shoots a dark look in the other pro's direction. It only makes Izuku struggle harder to muffle the rest of his laughter in his bandaged arm. Yeah, Present Mike huffs, flapping a dismissive hand in Aizawa-sensei's direction as the two of them briefly catch gazes. The blonde-haired man glances back at Izuku quickly, a worried frown settling on his lips before he straightens up from his lean into the room. I get it. I'm going. Chillax, won't ya? I'll see you in first period, little listener. Well, hopefully at least, if Recovery Girl doesn't keep you to herself this morning. Present Mike leaves with a fleeting wave before Izuku can offer so much as a greeting or a goodbye, leaving him alone with Sensei. And Oboro. Izuku spots the ghost lingering in the hallway, eyebrow arched in silent question. He must have been stood behind the two pros who'd been blocking the door, just observing. Oboro looks between Aizawa-sensei, Izuku, and down the hall, most likely at Present Mike's receding back, like he's trying to decide where to be. Izuku silently hopes the ghost chooses to come to him, but unfortunately, the ghost seems to want to stick to routine. He shoots Izuku an awkward wave and a half-sympathetic smile before he's disappearing from sight in the direction Present Mike had left in. Izuku's gaze lingers on the doorframe, unsure if he's upset Oboro left him alone with Aizawa-sensei, or relieved that his friend won't be around to watch Izuku get his ass chewed out for missing classes yesterday. Something interesting in the hallway, Midoriya. Izuku stiffens at the sound of his teacher's voice, attention snapping from where they'd been lingering to focus on his teacher instead. He wasn't even sure how long he'd just been staring off into space, probably looking like a fool. Izuku barely manages to bite back a cringe, but to his surprise, his teacher doesn't look angry or upset. He just looks tired, maybe even confused. Realizing belatedly that he'd been asked a question, Izuku frantically shakes his head. The man eyes Izuku again, a sharp, calculating glint in his gaze as he looks from the student to the door the boy had been staring out. Maybe it's an attempt to see what Izuku had seen, despite Izuku's insistence that he hadn't been looking at anything. As expected, the man clearly sees nothing of interest, his attention flicking back to Izuku after a moment. Aizawa-sensei lets out a heavy-sounding sigh, seeming to let it go. Izuku watches his teacher step fully into the room, shoulders slouching as he makes his way to his desk at the front of the room. His steps are slow and sluggish, and Izuku can only assume the man is exhausted from an overnight patrol, like Oboro had told him. He has a newfound respect for the man. It must be tough being an overnight hero and still coming to school and teaching during the day. The man plops into his chair the moment he reaches it, eyes finding Izuku once again when he's seated. You're here awfully early, Midoriya. Yes, sir. Izuku nods slowly as he carefully lowers himself into his seat. I thought that if I came early, then Recovery Girl could heal my injuries before classes, so I wouldn't have to miss any more lessons, but... Izuku bites his lip, head bowing. But she's not here yet. Izuku's shoulders lift in a defeated shrug, pain spiking down his arms as he does so. It's not overbearing, but the dull pain isn't pleasant either. Recovery Girl usually doesn't get in until after 7:30. The man explains plainly, not looking up from the papers he's looking through at his desk. Oh. The word comes out as nothing more than an exhale as Izuku wilts faintly. If the man hears the defeated exhale, he doesn't let it show. He simply continues flipping through his papers. So much for that plan, then. Izuku's not sure what to add at that point, so he stays silent. He feels a little humiliated, even if he literally couldn't have known what time Recovery Girl got to school in the mornings. Still, he feels silly, even thinking that Recovery Girl would be here so early, as if waiting for him to arrive, like it's the only thing she does in life. It's not like any of the teachers live here. They've got lives and arrive in just as the students do. Izuku wants to let his head fall forwards until it hits the desktop, but he doubts Recovery Girl would appreciate a concussion on top of everything else. That said, the man continues after a short while, Izuku's gaze finally flicking up to find the man still not looking at him. It was a rational idea. Arriving early in hopes of getting fixed up before classes was logical. Had you informed Recovery Girl of your plan, I'm sure she wouldn't have minded coming in early to help. I suppose you probably weren't thinking very clearly after spending the afternoon with her yesterday, though. Izuku thinks the man might be paying him a compliment. Maybe. There's a hint of understanding in his words, so he clearly thinks Izuku had been on the right track. Maybe it hadn't worked out exactly, but the idea was still there. He was still here early. That had to count for something, right? And if he analyzes Sensei's tone, he thinks he might almost sound the faintest bit impressed, behind the usual dullness Izuku associates with his teacher's tone. It was a very long day yesterday, Izuku admits quietly. There's really nothing else to say. It was a long day. Recovery Girl used up what little stamina I had left, so I was pretty tired. It must have slipped my mind. I'm sorry for missing classes, Aizawa-sensei. I won't let it happen again. You definitely will. The man corrects with a sigh, attention finally lifting as he sets the papers down. But this incident wasn't your fault, so don't apologize. I'd planned on stopping by the infirmary to check on you yesterday, but my meeting ran late, and I ended up missing you. You got home all right, yes? Recovery Girl said she tried to get in contact with your mother, but she didn't pick up. Did you walk home alone? Oh, no. Izuku forces a crooked smile. A friend walked me home. My mother works long hours, so I wouldn't be too worried about her not picking up. Sometimes she's hard to reach. And besides, I'm okay. My friend even stayed with me for a while and made sure I got some rest, so it was fine. Sensei is watching Izuku pretty intently, his brow furrowed with an odd expression. Izuku doesn't really know what to make of the look on his teacher's face. He doesn't look particularly happy with Izuku's answer for some reason, but he doesn't say anything on the matter. Finally, the man ducks his head in a faint nod, leaning back in his chair as his eyes fixate on Izuku's slouching form. There's a beat of silence. I see you broke your arm again. The man redirects expertly. Using your quirk? Only the one this time. Izuku defends before he can really think better of it, like that would make any difference at all. Izuku's jaw snaps shut at his own outburst, his bandaged arm flattening almost protectively over the arm nestled in the sling. The burns were defensive wounds. Kachan wasn't very, well, he didn't hold back, I suppose. Not that he should have, or that I was expecting a classmate to. Just, I promise I didn't use my quirk to attack anyone, Sensei. I mean, like you said, I can't really control it, but it was the only way I could have seen us winning. Izuku swallows roughly, averting his gaze from Sensei's scrutinizing eyes. I needed to distract Kachan, while Uraraka went for the missile, so using my quirk was the best option. I swear, I only used it to defend. I didn't know how else to counter Kachan, it just... Maybe we were a little rough, but Uraraka needed something to use her quirk on, so that was really what won us the battle. Izuku let his voice peter off, wincing. Was he talking too much? It feels like he's talking too much. I watched the video recordings, Aizawa-sensei says after a lingering of silence. Bakugo. I assume he's the Kachan you're speaking of from the context. That's a cutesy nickname. You two knew each other before school, is that right? You both came from Aldera Junior High, and you're obviously familiar with each other from the recordings I watched. Are you friends? Well, Izuku bites hard at his bottom lip. I wouldn't exactly say we're friends. We're just. He doesn't. I mean, we used to be friends? Aizawa-sensei lets out a hum of acknowledgement, clearly prompting Izuku to continue. The man wants him to explain it to him, so Izuku does. We grew up in the same neighborhood is all, Izuku explains slowly, not looking at the man. And we were friends when we were little. We've always been in the same class, so we're familiar with each other, just... We sorta drifted apart when he got his quirk. I mean, he was just so powerful and I wasn't. It takes him looking at his teacher's surprised expression to realize what he'd just said. He's talking like a kid who never got a quirk. He has a quirk now. Oh no. Izuku's body stiffens up as he hurries to backtrack. He was just better with his quirk, you know? We were on different levels, and Kachan's very proud, so he didn't like that. He didn't like me. Anyways, he wasn't very nice to me after that. It carried on through elementary and junior high. I was never really liked, I guess, but it wasn't that bad. So he's bullied you before this incident? I wouldn't exactly put it like that. Izuku shakes his head sheepishly. It's just, that's who he is, Sensei. He's always been like that, so it's fine. Really, I don't mind. We grew up together, so if anyone knows Kachan, it's me. You really expect me to just brush this off? Sensei challenged, tone clearly distasteful and disagreeing. He burned your arm in an attack that was far too personal for the simulation battle trials you were doing. His intention was to hurt you, just like when he tried to attack you during the apprehension test. It was reckless, Midoriya. That was behavior that should not be tolerated. There's a subtle anger in Sensei's voice, but it's different from the anger he'd expressed on the first day of school, or the annoyance. This is a simmering kind of anger, like he was trying to understand, or perhaps he was trying to make Izuku understand what was wrong with this situation. Maybe he couldn't understand why Izuku didn't understand. Sure, Izuku tries to diffuse, shrugging his least injured shoulder as he fiddles with the edge of his sling. Maybe it was a bit personal, but that wasn't all on Kachan. I was a part of it too, and we were all a bit reckless yesterday, I think. It was our first time doing anything like that. Kachan was just playing to his strengths. That's just who he is. That's what he knows. He's a bit aggressive, but he's always been like that. He'll make a good hero. He'll be the best, like All Might. I know it, Sensei. That was never the question, Sensei says stiffly, shooting Izuku a skeptical look. My concern right now isn't whether or not Bakugo will make a good hero. It's whether or not a student in my class is safe. Bullying is a serious offense, Midoriya, and Bakugo's quirk is dangerous when used improperly. He had no regard for your safety, plain and simple. If he was that careless with his quirk when fighting a classmate, history or not, then that's a red flag in my books. Something needs to be done about that, for your safety, as well as the rest of my class. The man is quiet for a long second, like he's stewing on his words. And then, those burns on your arm are serious, and I can't overlook that. I can't overlook his negligence toward his peers, his improper quirk usage, or his overpowered attack on a classmate in a pretend battle exercise. No one should have gotten hurt, and no one else got hurt like you did. It wasn't negligence, Izuku assured loudly, desperately. He could already imagine himself after Kachan was through with him, should the ash blonde be expelled from Yuuei because of him. Really, I'm okay. I don't hold anything against him, honest. Kachan didn't do anything too bad, Sensei. It barely even hurt. Please don't, expel him or anything. He worked hard to get here. He deserves to be here. I don't want to be the reason he gets expelled. No one's getting expelled. Not yet, at least. Aizawa-sensei breathes out through his nose. rubbing at his eyes with his thumb and index finger. There is potential in your class. You all have potential, Bakugo included. That much is obvious. If I didn't think you had potential, none of you would be here right now. But that said, I can't just ignore Bakugo's actions either. That's twice, Midoriya. Twice in 3 days of school where he's tried and succeeded in harming another student, you specifically. That won't fly in my class. But I don't mind. Izuku is sure his voice is barely above a whisper. Well, I do. Aizawa-sensei levels him with a knowing look that makes Izuku want to shrink in on himself. Look, I won't do anything permanent, all right? He'll be getting a detention for using his quirk inappropriately as some sort of a personal vendetta against you during a training exercise. That's nothing more than school policy for misuse of a quirk. He went too far. I'm sure even you can agree to that. No one's getting expelled, but I can't have a student behaving like that, not a future hero at this school. Aizawa-sensei looks away for just a second, before his gaze is back on Izuku. The man's head tilts just the slightest bit, as if he's trying to observe Izuku from a different angle. Izuku's not sure what his teacher finds as he lets out a sigh before continuing. Bakugo has a strong quirk, I can acknowledge that. But because he has a strong quirk, I can't let him carry on like he has been. That would be negligent on my part. I don't doubt he has a bright future here, but that means nothing if he can't treat his classmates with common decency. I'm not going to send a loose cannon hero out into the world. It makes sense, but still, Izuku's floored his teacher is actually trying to resolve their problems. For the first time ever, he's not getting brushed off. His teacher isn't just looking in the other direction and expecting it to resolve itself, or ignoring it until it goes away, until Izuku goes away. Aizawa-sensei had brought this up, not Izuku. A teacher was bringing this up and trying to problem solve. Izuku seriously can't believe it. The green-haired boy feels himself nod slowly, but it's an automatic motion more than anything. Seemingly content with the gesture of agreement, Sensei continues on sternly, but with a certain edge of softness that Izuku would never associate with his exhausted teacher. Now, I'll be looking into a more intensive quirk counseling program for Bakugo, and perhaps sessions with our school guidance counselor Hound Dog. I'd also like you to consider seeing him too. There's obviously some unresolved tension between the two of you, and stuff like that is dangerous to have in this profession. You don't have to like everyone you work with. That's not what this is about, and it would be illogical to believe the world is ever that simple. But you have to be able to put that aside, and be able to work together despite it, or you'll end up a casualty. Aizawa-sensei's tone softens the faintest bit, yet is still authoritative. You've got to be able to rely on your fellow heroes, and I don't trust either of you to have each other's backs yet. That's a problem. Izuku's head bobs in a scolded nod. As much as he'd like to believe Kacchan would save him if he were truly ever in danger, he honestly doesn't know if he would. There's a beat of silence where Izuku doesn't speak. The man looks like he is mulling over his words, a deep thoughtfulness in his expression. Finally, the man lets out a heavy sigh, suddenly sounding more exhausted than he had before. For now, though, until that's all sorted out, I won't be pairing you two together, or have you face off against one another. I want to limit your interactions with Bakugo, especially in a training setting. This will be the case until I see for myself that Bakugo can handle himself, until I no longer have to question if he'll keep his hands off of you. I don't want to risk another incident like yesterday if we can help it, all right? Yes, Sensei. Izuku chews on his bottom lip, burnt arm suddenly throbbing at the reminder. There's a weird feeling in his chest that this man, a teacher, is putting this much effort into protecting him, into keeping Izuku away from Kacchan. None of his teachers had ever really cared. Bakugo was strong and powerful, the one who actually had a legit shot at becoming a pro hero, and Izuku was the quirkless kid. They came from different worlds despite only living a couple streets apart. I also... Sensei's voice breaks Izuku from his thoughts. While I've got you here, would like to formally apologize. Izuku freezes, head snapping up as wide eyes catch Aizawa-sensei's waiting ones. Hang on. Aizawa-sensei was apologizing? To him? When the man is certain he has Izuku's attention, he continues. Yesterday should not have happened. All Might let that battle exercise go too far, and because of that, you spent the afternoon with Recovery Girl and missed your classes. I apologize for not being there to step in, and I apologize on behalf of All Might for his carelessness as your teacher. He should have protected you from harm. That's what we're supposed to do as the adults guiding you. I assure you that we will learn from this mishap. In addition to the words, Aizawa-sensei bows his head forward formally. Izuku has never felt more mortified. It's all right, he gasps out hurriedly. Really, Sensei, it's okay. I mean, ours was the only battle that really got out of hand, and that was because of Kachan and I, so please, don't apologize to me. I feel like I learned a lot from it anyways, and if anyone should be sorry, it's me, so, I'm sorry for causing so much trouble and wasting so much of your, All Might's, and Recovery Girl's time. Sensei opens his mouth, probably to reply, but nothing comes out. The man's teeth click audibly as his jaw snaps shut before he leans back against his chair and lets out a tired-sounding sigh as his thumb and index finger come to raise to massage at his eyes. After a second, the man's hand lowers to press against his mouth, regarding Izuku in exasperation. You really are gonna be a problem child, aren't you? I'm not sure I understand, Sensei. Forget it. The man flaps a dismissive hand. Izuku gets the feeling the words had been spoken more to himself than to Izuku. He still doesn't know what it means, though. Recovery Girl should be getting in soon, so it would be wise to make your way down to her office. Sensei suggests, as he tugs his sleeping bag out from under his desk. I doubt your plan will work at this point, but give it a try. I have a feeling she's not going to let you go willingly. Come see me after class if you get held back with her this morning, and I will help you catch up on everything you've missed due to this incident. This is a one-time offer, because this injury isn't entirely your fault, so don't make me regret it. We'll have ourselves a problem if you make this a habit. That's a kind offer. Izuku can't help but think. Maybe this guy isn't really as scary as Izuku thought. Thank you, Sensei. Izuku bows his head as he stands. Izuku gets a gruff hum as the man steps into the sleeping bag and starts to tug it up. Izuku suspects him being in the classroom when the man got to school this morning had inconvenienced and distracted the man from a before-school nap. Oboro had mentioned the man slept every chance he got, hadn't he? Izuku can't help but crack a smile as he steps towards the door. Tired after your patrol last night, Aizawa-sensei? Yes. The man's jaw snapped shut, mid-word, head jerking around to look at Midoriya, who was stood like a deer caught in the headlights of a car at the man's surprising reaction. How did you know I went on a patrol last night? I assumed? Midoriya's voice raises anxiously, backing away towards the door. Sorry, Sensei, you're an underground hero, right? And underground heroes, tend to patrol at night, because that's when the most activity is, and, you know what? I'm gonna go see if Recovery Girl's in yet. The kid's gone, before Shota can even begin to unravel the sentence he'd blurted out before fleeing the classroom. The man stares at the door for a long second, blinks once, then twice, before finally drawing his gaze away. The dark-haired man tugs his sleeping bag up over his head until just his face is peeking out, then sinks to the ground for a quick nap before classes start, and he has to be awake and responsible and actually teach. How tiresome. Still, as he lets himself doze, he can't help but think that was weird. All right, listeners, this concludes the first half to Chapter 3 of Yuuei Survival Guide. The second half to this chapter will be up next. I would love to hear the thoughts and reactions you're having to this one, so drop your comments below for me. Just a reminder, the fic is, as always, located over on AO3, so you can always slide over leaving comments, kudos, and support to the original author as well. I'm sure it's much appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.